Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is iFeng, Communications Officer here at the Columbia Global Centers, Beijing. I also is a Columbia alum, graduated last year with the Master of Arts in East Asia Regional Studies. My pity that I couldn't get into CBS, which Emily will introduce very soon later. Columbia Global Centers here in Beijing is one of the 9 centers all around the world, established with the insight of President Lee Bollinger, who had thought that we ought to go out there to the world, and we ought to bring the knowledge, the people, the talent back on our campuses. And here at the Columbia Global Centers Beijing today, we are glad and honored to have Ms. Emily French-Thomas here with us, the admission director of Columbia Business School. So please join us and warmly welcome Ms. Emily French-Thomas.
Did I say that right? We have some alumni here, and one of them taught me that phrase moments ago. So I'm very excited to be here with you, and thank you all so much for coming. I know some of you came from far away. We have some folks logging in online, so hello to the world, the interwebs. And I'm so excited to hear from you and also to have this be a little bit of a conversation. So I'm going to start and get to know you a little bit better, and then I will give a little bit of a presentation and tell you about the programs at Columbia and things that we think are really hallmarks of the Columbia Business School experience. And then there will be time for question and answer afterwards. But to get started, just to get a sense for who is in the room, how many of you are currently in a degree program, whether it's undergraduate or a master's program? Raise your hand if that applies to you. Okay, we do have a handful of folks there. And how many folks are in the workforce and planning to apply for the MBA? Okay, how many are planning to apply this year? And how many for next year or maybe 2 years down the road? Okay, a few. Fantastic. And now just to get a sense of areas of expertise, how many folks in the room are in social enterprise or nonprofit work? Okay. And how many people here are in healthcare? How about real estate? Got a real estate person. How many folks here are in retail? Or, yep, in the back, great. How about consulting? Okay, handful. How about financial services? Okay. So one of the reasons I like to ask these questions is it shows the group here that there is actually a lot of people from different areas, and not everyone has, what might be called a quote-unquote traditional MBA background. So I want to drive that point home, and I'll be doing that throughout the presentation, because there is no one right student for us. We really are looking for people with diverse backgrounds and who will bring different expertise to the table, and that makes the experience much better for the community and for the classes at CBS. All right, so to start, I like this photo. I like it because I think it's pretty. You get the nice lit up campus, but I also like it because it demonstrates what I think of as a key element of the Columbia experience, which is it is a prestigious research university surrounded by a major city. And this means that at the business school, not only do you have the opportunity to learn from great minds, thought leaders, really engage with academia, but you also are then able to bring in practitioners and learn about the application of these ideas and how you might use those ideas in your day-to-day when you're in the work world. So this is going to be a theme throughout the presentation, but I wanted to point that out. Now, before I go any further, how many people here have heard of the January entry program? Okay. How many people here have heard of the Executive MBA program and are interested in that? A couple. So just before I get started, I want to mention that we have 2 entry points for the MBA. And this is a little bit unique among our peer schools. Most schools have an August entering class, and they enter in August, they have 2 semesters, they have summer off to do an internship or something else, and then they come back for their second year, 2 semesters, and they graduate. It's great. We also have an accelerated version of that called the January entry program. And that January entry, or J-term for short, the J-termers start in January, as you might have guessed by the name. So they're starting a semester later than the August entry folks. They start in January, they take classes that semester. Then they take classes in the summer as well. They do not have a summer internship. And then they hit second year that next August with everybody else. Everyone's in the same place. Everyone is taking the same elective courses at that point. So I wanted to point this out because the January program is a little bit unique, and it's a really great opportunity for people who want to complete the MBA faster. Whether it's because they want to be in the work world more, they don't want to lose that paycheck for 20 months, they'd rather just do that for 16 months. But it's a really good fit for people who maybe are sponsored by a company, in a family business, or looking to do something similar to what they're doing now, but maybe a step above. So they are not necessarily changing industries or changing functions drastically, which might mean that a summer internship would be key to their ability to do that. Okay? So keep all of that in the back of your mind as we go through the presentation. So taking a step back, why do you get an MBA? Well, our mission at CBS is to develop leaders, or help develop leaders, who will add value or generate value for their stakeholders and the world. So that's a big chunk of our mission at Columbia Business School. And to us, fundamental elements of that experience of developing leaders are 2 things. One is connecting the dots. And when we say connecting the dots, what we really mean is thinking bigger. So we will train you in core courses. These are the fundamentals of business, and I have a slide next that'll graphically show this to you. It's nice and clear, but the core courses are things like accounting, statistics, corporate finance, marketing. Sort of pillars of business. And once you speak those languages and understand the elements of those sort of silos, you also begin to understand how they interact. And the way that our faculty designs those courses is very intentionally so that you do see how, the marketing initiative will impact strategy, how the external economic environment is going to impact your financial bottom line, right? So all of these things are really interconnected, and to be a functional leader, you need to be able to see that connection. We also want our students to think like entrepreneurs. Now, just to be very clear, that doesn't mean you have to be an entrepreneur or start your own company. But we believe thinking like an entrepreneur means that you are able to identify opportunity. So if there is really a problem, if there's some sort of challenge out there, some people see that as a problem that they are up against, and some people see that as an opportunity, and they think creatively about how they're going to bring value to the world by solving that problem, or by looking at that problem a little bit differently. Now, the way that we go about training these leaders, this is the basic structure for our academic program. The academic program, as I mentioned, starts with core courses, and then you go into electives. Now, the core is lockstep. You enter Columbia Business School, whether it's in August or in January, and you are put into a cluster, and that cluster is roughly 70 people. That cluster is your home base, and they are the people that you will be taking those core courses with, so you get to know them very, very well. And within that cluster, you are further divided into learning teams of about 5 to 6 people. So these learning teams will work together on projects in various ways throughout the core. So you really learn how to work with these people who maybe don't think the same way you do. They might be from different backgrounds, they might be from different countries, And this is part of how we try to broaden your mindset and help you connect dots, help you think more creatively by understanding how other people are thinking, as well as how you are approaching problems. So that's the core. Then, in your second semester, you only have one small half-core course. It's operation. It's a great course. But after that, you are free to take whatever electives you want. And as you take electives, there are no required majors at Columbia. So you're able to take, whatever elective you want. There's some tracks where there might be a prerequisite or an elective gateway course. But for the most part, it's fairly open, which means you can do a deep dive into a particular area. So if you are really interested in healthcare, you want to do a deep dive into healthcare, you can do that. Or maybe you take some healthcare courses and then maybe you take some social enterprise courses and you think about, how am I going to do good with this healthcare? Maybe you take negotiations because that's something that anybody might be able to use. So the point is, as you approach the MBA, it's really very much about you. It's about what your needs are, what gaps you have in your background that you need to address in order to become the leader you want to be, in order to reach the career goals that you have. So again, thinking about how we do that in New York. Because we are in New York, and because we are a prestigious, wonderful university, we are able to get a lot of amazing people up to campus. We have more than 450 speakers coming to campus every year, which is far too many for any one student to see. But you will have to make choices, and sometimes those choices are difficult, but they're rich problems to have. But we have all of these guest speakers, and they're coming not just because it's a great university, but also because it is convenient. It's a basic fact of life. People like to do things that are somewhat convenient to them. And a lot of our speakers, about half of our faculty, are actually working in the city. So they're not necessarily tenured faculty. Half our faculty are tenured faculty. Half our faculty are adjunct faculty. They work in the city, and they have a day job, and then they come up to teach class twice a week because they love interacting with students. But that means that they can come up to campus, and maybe they work at the Fed. And that morning they had an incredible meeting about all kinds of things that are happening in the US financial markets, and they can bring those meetings and that information to class with them. So there's that real-time exposure to what is going on in industry because the faculty are there. There are also these incredible speakers where you'll find that they're not just there for conferences, which they absolutely are. We have some phenomenal conferences. They're not just there for special guest lectures. We absolutely have amazing special guest lectures. But they also will just show up in your class. So you might be studying a case, and you and your classmates might be debating, oh, this CEO did it all wrong, and this is why. I think they should have done this. And the professor will call upon a stranger in the back of the room after the break, and the stranger will come up, and it will be the CEO, and she will tell you why she made the decisions she made and what was going on at the time. So again, you get that real exposure to how people are thinking through problems in the real world, so that you know how you might think through similar issues if you're exposed to them. In addition to that sort of secondary exposure to the real world in New York, you're also able to take what we call immersion seminars or master classes. And these courses are specifically designed to get you out into the city. The immersion seminars, as the name would indicate, immerse you in the city. So for example, we have an immersion seminar on consulting. And this is taught by Barry Salzberg, who's the former global head of Deloitte, which is a big consulting firm. And he takes the students he'll take them to Boston Consulting Group one day, he'll take them to Bain, he'll take them to Deloitte, of course, he'll take them to McKinsey, and each of those visits they get to sit with C-suite executives and talk about what's going on in their company, what are the challenges, what are they thinking of innovating, what's new. And that way, when they perhaps go into an internship in consulting in the summer, they already have that insider perspective on the industry, and they're able to ask informed questions when they go there. We also have masterclass opportunities where you, as a student, might get to work with a real company on a real business problem. So for example, we have a master class in luxury retail. And that class is designed so that you're split into learning teams, little teams. And in those teams, half the team is Parsons School of Design students, and half the team are Columbia Business School students. And then you have real clients, like Tiffany & Co., like Hermes, like I think Michael Kors was one year. So it's all different people from luxury retail. And they will help you, they'll tell you the problem, they'll tell you what they're thinking and working on, and then you go off with the Parsons design students and they design something and you come up with the business end, the marketing and all of that. And then you come together and present to these real CEOs and they might actually use your idea. So it's a great way not only to, again, get that real experience in working with an industry, working on a real business problem, but it's also a great way to meet people who are in an industry you might want to work in the future. So it's a great way to expand your network as well. Now talking about your network, the bottom of that slide mentioned that over 3,000 corporate headquarters are based in New York. And this is not geographically accurate, just in case you're taking notes. It's not. But it is just a small handful of all of the companies that, just a subset of the companies that have hired students either for summer internships or for jobs post-MBA in the past couple of years. And this means that there are a lot of CBS alumni in all of these companies, which again means that as a student, you get access to the alumni network. So you can reach out to these alumni and say, hey, I'm really interested in working at Dannon. And this is a new experience for me. Can I meet with you for 15 minutes and talk about what the corporate culture there is, talk about what your job is, and see if maybe this is a good fit for me. So these are ways where you can do research on companies, and you can also start to build your network with people who are working in the companies that are your dream companies, right? So this has really become a tradition at CBS, and it's amazing because our alumni are amazing. I really mean that. They are so incredible, and frequently you pick up the phone and you call them and say that you're a Columbia Business School student, and they'll actually respond, and they will have coffee with you, and then they'll introduce you to their colleagues and other connections. And it's that's not going to happen every single time, but for the most part, they're incredibly approachable and happy to give their time. So as admissions officers, when we're thinking about who we're admitting, we're also thinking about we want to admit nice people, because this makes our community better and it makes the success of our students much higher. So another piece of that community puzzle, because really the community is a huge part of what you're getting with an MBA. You're able to meet 70 new best friends in your first week, and there are very few instances in life where you get to do that after college, right? This is a unique time where you get to really bond with so many people. One of the ways you do that is through the professional clubs, or through any of the clubs for that matter. So those learning teams that you're in and those clusters that you're in, the cluster mimics the diversity of the class as a whole. And the class is very diverse. We had over 48% of our students were international last year. We have very high US minority rates. We have, a lot of people from different industries. So diversity is very, very important to us. And that is mimicked in your cluster. But then if you want to network with people who are interested in the same things that you are, you do that through the clubs. So there are professional clubs, and there are over 100 clubs, so they wouldn't all fit on here, so I just picked a few. But there are professional clubs, and this is where you will go to, for example, practice interviews with each other. So I knew someone who, not to harp on consulting, but I know we have a couple of consultants in the room, there was a student who graduated last year, and she was a coach for students who were looking to get into consulting. And she would sit down with them and drill over and over again the case study and the interview approach with them. And she was interviewing for the same jobs. So two students interviewing for the same exact thing, but they're helping each other out on the interview prep, because they know that ultimately it's a small world, and they're probably going to be colleagues at some point, and they care about each other, and they want to root for each other, even if only one of them ends up getting the job. It will be a win-win for everybody ultimately. So the professional clubs are really great resource for students. We also have affinity clubs. So for example, we have the Greater China Society. If you are interested in working in China, or sometimes there are people from other countries who are interested in working in China, and they'll join the Greater China Society, and then you can talk to them about what it's like to do business here. So that's kind of a fun one. We have the Better Halves Club, which I like to point out, that is not for our students. That is for the significant others of our students, because we know when you move to New York, if you're bringing a significant other, they are also uprooting themselves and moving to a new city. We want to make sure that they have a network and a support system as well. So they have people to go have fun with while you're studying for the corporate finance exam, which is very important. Then we also have, these are not clubs, these are actually international experience opportunities. The Chazen Institute is the hub of all things international. And they do an amazing job of creating programming with sort of different levels of commitment, I would say. So there are full semester exchanges with other schools. Not as many students will do that because it means taking a full semester away from their community at CBS. But some people do, and if you're interested in that, that is absolutely available to you. We also have global immersion programs, which it is an elective course, the Global Immersion Seminar. You will take about 6 class sessions with a professor before you go abroad, and then you go to the country and you look at whatever you were studying, and it can be any number of things. There are all kinds of fascinating immersion programs. And then you usually have, a paper or something at the end so they can grade you. And then there are international study tours, and these are actually my favorite ones personally, because these are planned by students. And again, the Chazen Institute will come in and make sure that you get sessions with companies in the country where you're going, make sure that you get to do some corporate visits, you get some speakers, but it's also planned by students. So because 48% of our class was international last year, there are a lot of people who might want to show their cluster their hometown. So this could be an opportunity for you. If you want to show off Beijing, you could perhaps bring a study tour to Beijing and actually show off where you were living before Columbia. So as I mentioned at the beginning, there are just so many different paths to success. There are so many different ways to be the perfect student for CBS because there's no one right fit. And we are looking for a diverse class. It's a very holistic approach. We want people from all different walks of life because if you have people from different backgrounds, they think differently. And if they think differently, that means the conversation is richer and more productive in the classroom. So, you can see that we have graduates who found jobs all over the world. You can see that they found jobs in all sorts of different industries. 3% actually launched their own company or are in the midst of launching their own company. This is from 2016, so it's early days yet for some of those folks. And then basically the rest of the class had received some form of job offer by the time 3 months out from graduation. So careers are very important. And when you're thinking about the MBA, if you think about why you get an MBA, usually your career has something to do with it. You're either looking to move up in the same industry, you feel that it's an industry where having an MBA is an advantage, or there are a lot of people who come from industries where it's not necessarily a quote-unquote traditional MBA industry, but they know that thinking more broadly, having that kind of big picture mindset, having that leadership ability will really help them in the future. And those 3% of people who are launching their own company, they absolutely are happy to have an MBA because there are a lot of very important skills and also very important people that they've met through that MBA. I actually know several people where they started a business with someone else in their class because they met and suddenly their ideas came together and they were actually able to do something amazing with them. We had a couple of alumni, Taylor Justice and Dan Brillman, and they were both military folks. and they met on campus, and then they decided they needed to start a company that was essentially a hub for all vets to be able to find resources, because the system in the US government was so dispersed and difficult for them to find exactly what they needed. So there are things like that that can just happen because you meet the right person at the right time. So again, that community is going to be a huge part of what you get out of the Columbia experience. And so a lot of our alumni ended up, or a lot of our graduates ended up finding jobs all over the world. Well, you can see from this map we have alumni living all over the world. And they have very vibrant alumni clubs. We have some alumni club leaders here in the house tonight from Beijing. But they also are resources. So if, for example, you're working for a global company and they decide they're going to move you to a different city, all of a sudden you have a network in that other city that you can reach out to for things like, you know, what neighborhood should I look in for an apartment? Where should I send my kids to school? What are the good restaurants? You know, will you hang out with me because I don't have any friends here yet? Like, there are all kinds of great. I mean, but that's important. Really, really great things that can come from that just worldwide network that you can tap into at any time. It also means that, you know, you saw that 3% of people starting a company. Well, maybe 15 years down the road, maybe you don't start a company right out of school, but, you know, 15 years down the road you decide you want to. You can reach back out to those people who started something, you know, a few years ago and ask them what their experience was like. What were the problems they ran into? So people can be resources for each other throughout their careers. This is a lifelong network that you're entering. All right, so that's my spiel about the program for the moment. And I'm happy to answer questions in a bit, but now I just want to talk a little bit about how to get into the program. So this is more the admissions piece of the puzzle. What we are looking for, we like to put it into 3 buckets. One is academic strength, the next is professional promise, and then personality. We want to get to know you. And again, I say this a bunch of times, but there is no one right way to do this. The best thing you can do throughout is to be yourself. So as you are looking at your academics, of course these are important. Yes, we're going to ask you for your undergraduate GPA. So if you're still an undergrad, work on that. If you're out of undergrad, it's too late for you, so don't worry too much about it, right? What you want to think about now are the standardized tests, whether it's the GMAT or the GRE. We accept either one. We don't have a preference. If you do take the GRE or the GMAT and then you feel like you're not happy with your score and you want to retake, that's totally fine. Sometimes persistence is an important quality as much as being perfect and getting it right the first time. Persistence might actually be more important in many fields. So it's fine to retake. What I would suggest is retaking the same one. Don't switch back and forth. People tend to get better at one when they retake the same one. It's just a tip. And then we do ask for a language test, the TOEFL, the PTE, or the IELTS. We don't give minimums for that. We just ask that you take it so we can gauge, you know, if you are able to speak English. If you have studied at an English-speaking university and gotten a degree, whether it's a master's or undergrad, then you don't need to take the language test. Okay? Professional promise. This one, in some ways, they're all important, but to some degree, I think this one is one of the most important, because when you think about the reason you're getting an MBA, part of that reason is your career. So it's not that you necessarily have to be, you know, have a top job or work at a very prestigious company. None of that is necessarily the important thing. But it is important that you have done well and worked really hard and clearly are showing that you're progressing in your career when you apply. And that might be, you know, you got to lead a team on a project, not necessarily that you manage lots of people yet, right? So it's what makes sense for you. Tell your story, but make sure that you're really telling it. So when you give us that professional resume, make sure it's clear. Make sure we know what all the jargon means. In other words, don't use too much jargon. And, you know, make sure that you're really highlighting the things that you've done that are, that you're proud of, right? You want to highlight those things. The other thing you want to do as you think about that first essay, and I can talk a little bit more about the essays in a minute because I know we recently changed our essays. But the first essay, whether it was our old one or our new one, it's about the same thing. It's about your career, and it's asking you, what is your job for the, what job do you want to have in the next 3 to 5 years, and then what's your dream job? And the reason we ask it that way is partly we want you to be, we want you to think big. We want you to really try and do something amazing. But we also want you to be realistic. So we're asking you to draw out the steps between where you are now and where you're going to go, so that we can see that you're strategic and that you really know what you need to do in order to reach your goal, right? So that's an important one. Then the personal characteristics, and this is very important as well, but this, just be you. And whoever you are, don't try to fit into a mold because someone told you that, admissions officers really like people who go skydiving or whatever it is, right? Just be yourself, whatever it is that you are passionate about, or however you would like to spend a free day anywhere in the world. Those are the 2 essay options. You can choose either one. And just let us see a little bit of you as a person, and that's what we're asking for. We just want to get to know you. All right? And then there will be potentially an interview. The way our admissions process works, we read applications, and then within 6 weeks of reading the application, we will let you know whether or not you've been invited to interview. If you're invited to interview, generally speaking, you will interview with an alum in your local area. And this is a great opportunity for you because you get to meet an alum in your local area, and you get to be inquisitive. So yes, it's a professional interview, dress professionally, be on time, be a professional. All of those things are important. But you also want to make sure that if you still have questions about the alum's experience, that you're asking that. Because, why not? They're sitting right there. You should engage in that conversation, and it should be a conversation. Okay? So finally, just to give you the schedule for those folks who are thinking of applying this year, and for folks who are thinking of applying in a future year, the schedule is actually very similar year to year. We change it by a day. So, but we have something called rolling admission. I'm going to say it again. Rolling admission. This is important because what we do not have are rounds. We don't have rounds. Our peer schools have rounds. We don't have rounds. We have rolling admission. And that rolling admission means that we are reading applications as we get them. We read the application, 6 weeks later we let you know whether or not you can come in for an interview, or within 6 weeks we let you know about the interview. And then 2 weeks after we get the interview report, we let you know the final decision. Which means you could have everything wrapped up and you could be in to get your MBA and know what's going on very early in the process. So we don't like to drag it out too much. We do have deadlines, and the deadlines are important to know. So if you're interested in that January entry program, then you would want to apply by October 4th. That's all you need to think about, just that October 4th deadline. With rolling admission, we do have more seats earlier in the process because we're filling them as we go. So that does mean that there is some advantage to applying earlier in the overall process as opposed to much later in the process. So that is a big clue. It's a big hint. We also have something called early decision. There's an early decision deadline, which is the same date as the January deadline. They are not the same program, but it's easier to just keep in mind one date instead of multiple dates. So that's why we do it that way. But early decision is for people who know that Columbia Business School is the only place they want to be, or the most preferred place that they want to be, and that there are no other factors outstanding that are going to prevent you from coming if you were admitted. Early decision is binding, which means that we will ask you to withdraw your applications from any other school if you were admitted to Columbia. So, apply early decision by all means. We will read those applications first, but you should be sure if you're doing that. So do your research beforehand. We do also have a fellowship deadline. So we have what we like to call two buckets of free money. One is merit-based fellowships, And to apply for a merit-based fellowship, you just need to check a box. It says, please consider me for merit-based fellowships, and apply by that deadline, which is January 5th. So if you're applying by January 5th, or if most people are applying by January 5th, and we have rolling admission, even if you don't care about a merit-based fellowship, you probably want to apply before that tidal wave of the bulk of the applications come in. So target applying, November, December, and then you'll be a little bit ahead of the curve, because most people will submit their applications the week of January 5th. It's human nature, it's okay. And then we do have a final deadline of April 11th. So if you come to this late in the game and you realize all of a sudden, no, I do want to do the MBA this year, I'm going to apply now, that is absolutely fine. Go for it. Just know that we are rounding out the class toward the end of the process. So someone will submit an application on April 11th and we will accept them. But that is going to be a stunning application, very, very competitive, and they will happen to fit whatever niche we're looking for in that moment. So, maybe we want to fill out our, whatever it is, value investing program. Make sure we've got students for that program because it's a great one. Well, maybe we're, shy on that student, so we take the person who's applied who happens to fit that profile, right? And there's no way to predict what that would be at the end of April. You just know that it's a little bit more of a gamble. Beginning of the process, we have more flexibility to admit the people who are really strong that we think would be a great fit with the class. Later in the process, there might be 2 amazing candidates and we can only take 1, and it just breaks our heart. So apply earlier. So that is my presentation. But now, now I'd like to I will open it up to questions in a second, but first I would actually like to introduce our 2 alumni who are here. Will Mr. Lee and Mr. Fan please come to the stage? Or you can come just off stage if that makes you happier. Whatever works. So can I ask you to introduce yourselves and maybe just say, what it is that makes you keep coming back to these events? Why does Columbia mean so much to you?
So I've been asked to move towards the center of the stage so I get to be on camera. Hi. The last time I live broadcast, I had about 12,000 viewers. So this, I don't know what's the number. I heard 8,000, which isn't bad, Yeah. Steve, come on. So hi everyone, my name is Wen Xing, Columbia Business School class of 2004. I am based in Beijing as we speak. I live here. I'm originally from Jiangsu province. Jiangsu. What is it that I have to?
Why do you love CBS?
Oh, why do I love CBS? Okay, so I applied. So this is back. So now let's do the math. I graduated 2004. That means I went to school in 2002. I was regular track. I was not a J term. So that means I applied in 2001. That's sort of how the math works. So back in 2001, I was right here in Zhongguancun, Beijing, like all of you. Well, maybe not all of you are from Zhongguancun, but that's just where we're sort of here now. 然后 so what happened was, all right, I applied early decision. She had on the board early decision, and I applied early decision. And I wanted to live in New York City, which ended up happening. And then I graduated. And then now I've been back in China. So very quickly after I graduated, I came back to China since the end of 2004. So I guess this is now 13 years. And I work in the media industry, so it's fun. And the one big takeaway, if you remember nothing else from today, all right, is that if you want to go to business school, you probably have a handful of schools that you can choose from, right? That'll get you really good education and get you a good job, and But the one key takeaway I want to give you is you are all here from Beijing, or at least you're living in Beijing now, right? And there's probably 2 cities, or maybe 3, in China that you prefer to be where you want to be for your careers. We're here talking about business. We're not here to talk about other schools. So this is career driven, right? And so there's probably about, 1 city in the United States that will compare to a place like Beijing or Shanghai in China, which is New York City. All right? So if you went to Boston, and I did 4 years in Boston for my undergraduate degree, so I know that city really well. But as a business place, it's no comparison versus New York City. So my big point is, that is the Columbia advantage, and that's what you'll be immersed in a place where you will have a limitless amount of opportunity with which you shall thrive, should you choose. 好吗？我就先说这么多，大家一会儿有问题再交流。好，谢谢。
邢总啊，这个 he's the boss, so I think he mentioned everything already, so I don't need to speak too much. But anyway, 邢总 is undergraduate from Harvard, and then he's coming to CBS. That's the reason, right? I don't need to explain more. So anyway, when I applied business school, I think back about 10 years ago, more than 10 years. I graduated in 2008. So I think, I remember in 2005, I drove in Boston and also went to New York. And then in New York, how many people went to Columbia already? Show your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only a few. So anyway, so when I, New York is really noisy places, right? Like in Shanghai or Beijing. On the street, there's a restaurant, everything. And then all of a sudden, when you get into Columbia, the place is very different. It's quiet. It's a grass. And then it's a very, I think it's like some place you want to study every day. It's in the middle of a city, which is a modern city, but you can learn everything about your life, right? So that's very different. So that's the reason, there's a question. Do we have that question again? So why you speak, why do you
love CBS?
No, why you want to New York? Born in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things you can learn and you can leverage when you're in New York. And then back to my life, I think when I graduated from Columbia, the most important thing I learned is that you can explore yourself. And then in college, everyone will learn about the hard skills, right? So your IQ is good. You're really, really smart and everything. But what about your EQ, right? So that's very important because when you grow in your career, your EQ is super important in your company and also your relationship with your friend, with your family. I think that this is something, I have to say something for the education in China, but this is something missing in China. But you can learn, you can practice in CBS. So, that's everything I want to say. Okay. And again, if you have more questions, we can come back to the Q&A session.
Yeah, so thank you so much. So and I think Mr. Singh and Mr. Fun will also stick around for Q&A. So you can have questions for me or for either of them. That's fine. So who has a question? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mandy. I used to work in equity trading and now I'm in social entrepreneurship. I'm very curious for the 2 alum on stage. What are your favorite parts of your CBS experience and anything you wish you could have done differently with your CBS experience?
The girls. No, I'm not kidding. Okay? The one thing, because to be very, very honest, this is absolute truth. I married a classmate at Columbia Business School. So it's true. But all kidding aside, one thing in pop culture, now this is not necessarily true. So I met my friend the other day at this event, it's a few months ago, and I asked her, why did they portray your character as a graduate of Columbia Business School? Okay, and she stars in this show called 欢乐颂. Okay, and then she's like, well, I don't know, I'm just an actor. I'm not a scriptwriter. But then I went to the people and I said, scriptwriter. There's in pop culture, at least in Chinese pop culture, there is a notion that Columbia, not just business school, but Columbia University, I guess, breeds goddesses. Okay, it's true though, because Steve will testify. Every class we admit some of the most gorgeous ladies. We're in China, I can talk like this. No. And the most handsome guys, right? Look at us, right? So I'm trying to bring some levity to the situation. But what I'm trying to say is, appearance aside, you'll see some of the best people as your classmates. And those people are the way you learn, okay? The professors only matter, 30% of the time. It's the other 70%, okay? And that's how you and this is the best part.
One thing I want to add on to Mr. Xing is that at the CBS, it's a platform. You can practice a lot of things. So you learn your stuff in the schools, from college, from graduate school, but you have to practice it, right? So it's in business school, it's free. And then remember this: when you practice something, you can make a mistake. And then when in school, no one can say anything wrong about you, right? But you did a great job. All the people will say, great, congratulations. But back to the reality, when you make a mistake, everyone will say you, not like Donald Trump will fire, but it's like, okay, you made a mistake. You have to be very careful, right? So when you practice, and you just learn everything from the school and practice everything in the school, when you come to the reality, to the job, you are really confident about everything you're doing. Any more questions?
I also just have to address one thing about the looks of the student, because I do sometimes get a question because we ask for a photo in the application. Just to clarify, your looks have nothing to do with whether you're admitted. They're actually just so that we can remember if we've met you on the road. That is literally the only reason we ask for them. I just wanted to, it's a little awkward thing. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have two questions regarding two sets of questions. First, regarding the J term, the brochure says it allows a qualified student to take the J term. So, what are the qualifications? And when you apply, do you have to choose if it's a January entry or August entry? And second question is, I come from a real estate background. I just wonder what percentage of students are coming from that background typically, and what percentage are going to that area after graduating from the MBA program?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first question, the qualifications are the same. So we're looking at the same things for our students, whether they're entering the J term or the August entry, with one specific difference, and that is we're going to ask you to talk about your career trajectory and what you're hoping to do. And if what you're hoping to do seems to require a summer internship, in other words, if you are changing industry drastically and we feel like you're not going to be able to do that without an internship, then that's the requirement that we might be looking at, right, for J-term specifically. Outside of that, though, J-term students actually are able to do in-semester internships, but just so you know, they tend to be more casual. or they tend to be in industries that are a little less structured. So there are some industries that have structured summer internships that are really the only way to break into that industry. Consulting and investment banking are two of those. They're the two main ones. So that's sort of the framework for that. And then your second question was about real estate.
About the first one.
Yeah.
You have to choose.
You do. You will specify which program you're applying for, because in the application, so that we know as we're reading, is this person a good fit for the program they're applying for. There have been times where someone will apply for one program and will read the application and really love the person, but think, this person might actually, based on what's going on with them, they might be a better fit for the other program. That's a little bit rarer. So in general, you should apply for the thing that makes the most sense for you, and you should apply for whatever it is that you want. If you really want to do something short and a little bit faster for your own kind of personal reasons, and your career trajectory will fit with that, go for the J term. If you would rather do something that has that summer internship, is a little bit longer, that's fine too. You can apply for August. So this is your program. It's about you, so it should fit you. In terms of real estate, I would have to look at the website to know the exact numbers, but I want to say it's about 4 to 5% of the class is coming from real estate, and sort of similar numbers going back into it, maybe a little lower potentially. But I think it also changes from year to year. So some years we'll see spikes and dips. So yeah, and it tends to be more market driven. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, my name is Alice. I work for a nonprofit organization named Institute of International Education. Yes, so my question is, you mentioned there are some nonprofit students going to Columbia Business School, and can you introduce a little bit more about that, and what is the admission rate? And do you have like a certain number of students coming from China every year? Like, do you have a certain number for that? The last question is that, sorry, will the application for the fellowship, merit-based fellowship, impact your chance to get into Columbia Business?
Okay, good question. So 3 questions. So the first question was about nonprofits. Just to address rates in general, in case everyone's tempted to ask me what percentage of people from their particular background gets into Columbia, I honestly don't know off the top of my head for most of them. So we do have a website and we list a lot of that. It does shift a little bit year over year, but you can see on our website there's a class profile, and it'll tell you what percentage of the class happens to be from a particular background that year. So that will be much more accurate than I will be. We also have an employment report that's posted on our website, which will tell you where they end up post MBA. So that is also more accurate. Just because I have not memorized all of this. The second question.
Is there like a specific number of Chinese students?
So specific number of Chinese students. The answer is no. I mean, yes, there is a number of Chinese students each year that gets admitted, but that number changes year over year. We do not have minimums, we do not have maximums for any particular group, and also we're reading the application rolling, again, so we're reading it as we go. We don't have the whole pool to look at all at once to say, oh, these are the people we like from this group, these are the people, no. We look at you as individuals. So we're reading your application, we're thinking, does this person seem to know that they're a good fit for Columbia? Have they done their research? Are they convinced that they're the right fit for the school? Do they have various things that we can tell will help them in the program? There are a number of things in the application itself that are actually prompts for you to think about your career and your life and why you want to get the MBA, so that if you're admitted once you get to campus, you're ready for that experience. So we look at those things to try and see, are they going to really do well here? Are they going to be happy here? As far as we can tell that from a piece of paper. And then we also are looking for, what are they going to bring to Columbia? Do they have passion? Are they engaged? Are they going to be, committed members of the community? So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. When they're, from one country, that's great. We are looking for diversity, so we want to make sure that we do get people from a lot of different countries, but we don't necessarily say, oh, well, that's the last Chinese student, we can't admit anyone. Nothing like that.
The better question is that, like each year, probably you will have like 30 or 40 students from a country, like a foreign country.
Yeah.
And also, what is like the number for last year's
I want to say around 36.
36.
Yeah, for Chinese students. I want to say that.
And how
It
many?
might be more like 35. I don't. Yeah.
Alright, so
It's in that range.
sorry. So how many students applied actually from China?
That number I do not know off the top of my head. Yeah. Overall, though, I think last year's or the last published number was a 17% admission rate. So, and that's for everybody overall. And where you come from has less to do with that admission rate versus when you're applying. So your chances of getting in are, statistically higher when you apply a little bit earlier in the process, and statistically a lot lower if you're applying late in the process.
Hey, Alan, let me add on that. So just for your question about the number of Chinese students, I think 10 years ago it's only about like 20 something, and it's growing. So you can see the number from 20 to 40 pretty much is like a double, right? So be confident, just prove yourself. You're gonna have a chance. Okay?
All right, probably you will be my interviewer in the location.
I'm sure about that.
Well said, Steve. Thank you very much. Yeah. Be confident. Be yourselves. You'll be fine. Right.
Hi, I'm in my third year of university undergraduate.
Okay.
I'm thinking about applying this year and applying a position next year.
Okay.
Do you require me to have a work experience? Is that necessary, or can I just apply there?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked, because I'm sure there are some other people in the audience thinking the same thing. The short answer is, yeah, you should get some work experience before you apply for an MBA. And the reason is twofold. So, first of all, you're only going to do the MBA once. And when you're doing the MBA, you really do want to have a sense of what you want to do when you get to campus. There are over 100 student organizations. There are 450 speakers coming to campus. There are hundreds of electives you could potentially take. So there are so many choices. If you don't have some experience to know what you do like and what you don't like, it's going to be much harder for you to really hone in on what you want to do. So that, just for you, it's important that you have tried some things and have that experience. It is also important, as we look at candidates, we're looking for, have you excelled in your workplace? We're looking at future professionals and future leaders. And if you don't give yourself a little time to work in the work world, to have experience in the workforce, you're not necessarily going to have the experience to come into class and say, oh, we read this case, I had a situation in my office that's similar to this, or in some cases, hey, I was part of this case because I was in that office when this was happening. Whatever it is, just having that ability to really have a frame of reference for what you're talking about in class is very important.
One thing I want to add is let me stand up. So when you graduate from college, basically you don't have experience, right? So when you enter the business school, you're gonna feel really, really hard because you're gonna sit in the cluster about 60 or 70 people. Everyone has about like 3 or 5 year experience. And they're gonna talk a lot of things you have never been experienced. And in that time, you're gonna feel so awkward. And then professor are gonna call you, say, what's your view about this? You cannot say anything. You're gonna embarrass yourself. But the one thing come back is when you learn about everything experience from your work, and then come back to the school, you're gonna feel, oh, this is something already gone through, right? And then I can learn, I can feel the pain, or maybe I can learn or feel like some exciting stuff. I can share with my clusters. So that's very important. So just be patient. And then I talk to a lot of people say, oh, I want to go to graduate school, and then business school is not the normal graduate school you want to enter after your college. So be patient, be a few years, and then you're going to feel really confident when you come out from the business school. Okay?
I also just want to point out that in some ways you're so fortunate right now, right? And I remember when I was graduating from undergrad, it did not feel necessarily that way, but you have the opportunity. It's never too early to start thinking about what your values are, what you really care about, what you do enjoy, what you really don't enjoy, and start thinking about what that means for your life and what kind of goals you might have. And it doesn't mean you have to reach those particular goals. You can always shift course. But if you get in the habit of starting to think about what things you want, it becomes easier to think about how, what do you need to do now in order to prepare yourself for the next step, to ultimately reach that thing. So if you're thinking, you're an undergrad, and let's say, I'm making this up, but let's say, your dream job someday is to be, to run a hospital or something like that. So you can think about, well, what types of work will help let me know whether or not that's a real goal. Is that actually something I want to do? Do I intern at a hospital? Do I take a job doing some other sort of healthcare thing? Do I take a job doing consulting because maybe I will get to do some healthcare consulting or at least get to see how different companies work? There are things like that that can help prepare you for that future goal. And so the more you think about that now, the kind of more you're able to line things up and then dismiss them as things that you absolutely don't want to do.
So you mentioned work experience is very important.
Yeah.
So it's at how many years is recommended? Like say 1 year or 3 years, or it's not?
I mean, it's different for different people. 99% of our students have at least 1 year of work experience. The average is 5 years, and there's a range that's much broader than that. Sort of, I think it's 3 to 8 years, something like that, in the middle 80%. And of course, there are always outliers, right? But in general, the outliers are going to be on the higher end for the MBA rather than on the lower end for the MBA.
So if we graduate for like 1 or 2 years, we can still apply, or it's recommended to work for like 3 years?
I mean, look, you can always apply. We're not going to prevent you from applying. We just want to also make sure that you're, set up for success. We don't want you to apply and then, get discouraged by not getting in because maybe you need another year or two. And only you can really evaluate that. The one person I know who was admitted right out of undergrad had started a business. It was a fashion company, and it was extraordinarily successful and already like a big money-making hit in Russia by the time that she applied. And she was just graduating from college. So okay, she's got some work experience, that's fine. But not everyone is gonna have that. Some people will, go through a job and kind of hit some markers and get to the next step. And that's great too. It just takes more time for some people than it does for others.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Vladimir. I'm actually working in the technology sector. I have the 2 questions. One is, do you provide the joint degree program so you can get a master's degree alongside the MBA?
Yeah.
The second one is, what kind of career support do you have in Colombia?
Yeah.
For 2 things. One is the internship, and second one is the further career. Thank you.
Okay. So the first question I'm a little jet lagged. You're gonna have to remind me the first question again. Joint degree. Fantastic. So yes, we absolutely have joint degrees. I am blanking on how many exactly we have, but we have joint degrees with the School of International and Public Affairs. We have a joint degree with the law school, JD MBA. We have an MD MBA. We have a joint degree with the dental school, a DDS MBA. We have joint degrees with Mailman School of Public Health. So yeah, we have a number of different joint degrees. With technology. We do actually have a lot of engineering people who take courses at the business school. So, but I don't know off the top of my head, to be completely honest. So if it is, it's a small program. But you can reach out to me, email me about it, and I will find out for you. by the way, I did not bring business cards. I know that's shocking here. Business cards are a big thing, so I apologize. But I am in the directory for Columbia Business School under Emily French Thomas. You can find me. My email is ekf2111. It's actually a really confusing email, but ekf2111 at gsb.columbia.edu. The GSB stands for Graduate School of Business, in case that makes it easier. But definitely feel free to reach out to me for something like that, and I'm happy to do a little investigative digging for you.
So I can find you on the website, right?
You can find me on the website, Emily French Thomas. Yeah. And then your second question was a very good one. Career support. So yes, we have an Office of Career Management, and they are a fantastic, fantastic team. They do things like resume reviews. They help you figure out, what your likes and dislikes are. They will go all the way through to coaching you about how to negotiate for a salary when you're starting to get offers. So there's that piece of the puzzle. They also manage something called on-campus recruiting. So those summer internships I mentioned where they're very structured with certain companies. So that's called on-campus recruiting. And on-campus recruiting is basically for large companies who know that they're going to hire, so many associates every single year, and they go to a handful of campuses to do that. And Columbia is one of those campuses. So big consulting firms, investment banking, CPG, some big tech companies will do that as well. So it's a very structured process, and there is a lot of support for that, partly because there has to be. The interviews themselves are actually on campus. Then there's what I like to call how everyone else gets a job in the real world, as opposed to in the lovely MBA world, and that is called enterprise recruiting. So for example, social enterprise, for some smaller companies, where they're not necessarily hiring 100 associates each year, they're basically hiring, one person because one person left. That type of recruiting there is also a lot of support for, and the support comes both from the Career Management Center, where it's more coaching support and kind of help thinking through what's your next step and how are you going to network for this. They also will have listings and a resume book where people can go and sort of look through our students. But that also comes from the clubs themselves, because clubs bring in a lot of speakers who you'll network with, and the clubs also will get listings of opportunities like in-semester internships and things that are a little less formal like that.
But career support only extending in the US or it's international?
No, it's international. We actually, my colleague Mike DeLucia is in charge of the international recruiting, and he's actually traveling to China in July, I believe. But he does a lot with companies. So he builds relationships with companies to make sure that there are people who are interested in providing internships for our students and who are interested in hiring our students after the MBA. There's also an amazing alumni network, and the alumni network is going to be helpful just in terms of knowing people in a different country as well. But yeah, we do, 30% of our students got jobs internationally outside of the US, so there are definitely a lot of resources to help them do that. Yeah. All right, I'm thinking, how are we on time? Yeah, yeah, please.
Okay.
Always.
For the career management stuff, this is very different than compared to college or graduate schools in China. Okay, they don't have career management office, and I think that Tsinghua has one, but didn't do a good job. But again, the thing is, when you get got offer from Columbia Business School, the career management office, they're going to start your career before you enter the school. So let's for example, Mike will be in China in July. So the reason why, because everyone knows that you want to go to Columbia, you want to go to business school, and then the next target, you want to find a job, right? So they're going to help you before you enter the school. So you're going to help you to prepare for your resume, help you structure your stories, and also in the schools, starting from September. All the info sessions coming from all the corporates are going to be on campus. They're going to help you to coach you how to interview with the companies. So which is very important because in your career, this is super critical when you talk to the clients, talk to the companies. Because China, I know China has a rule, you have to go through tests, right? Give you a paper, you're going to write a test, and you're going to submit. But in US, normally you're going to have an interview, 30 minutes. So in 30 minutes, how are you going to tell your story? How are you going to persuade other people you are the best person, you are the best candidate? Did you learn anything about this in China? Not actually, right? So in business school, they're going to teach you how to tell your stories, which is very helpful for all of people. And then not only for your job from your business school, but also for the future.
Great. All right, let's take more.
Thank you, Emily. My name is Amanda, and I actually have a question for the two alums. Thank you. As we all know that like CBS and Columbia have a lot of like very famous alums here in Beijing and in China, like you two, and also like Mr. Liu Qiangdong and his wife. Yeah. So I want to ask, like, what's your experience and about the local alums society? What's it like when you come back from the US and you want a job in China and you want connections in China? Is the alums society very supportive? And can you raise examples for this? Thank you.
I hand over to the president of the Beijing Columbia Alumni Association.
Okay, Steve Fan here. So I'm the co-president of Columbia Business School Beijing Alumni Club. So back to your question, I think the club, even though we don't have a lot of people like 1,000 people, we have only a few hundred people. But I think our club has the most events than any other club from business school. So we have, in 2016, we have about 14 events. So pretty much every month we have one event. And then we have 3 flagship events. Like in May we have a Spirit Flame, which is like a spring ball, combine all the dancing, drinking, everything together. And then we join the event from other schools as well. So I mean the platform is kind of unique, but it's give you a chance to meet all of the alumni and then from the current students and the future prospective students as well. So I mean anytime you want to come, you can feel free to talk to any alumni you want to, and then just tell about your dream, something you want to do in China, etc. And then you're gonna help each other. And I think this is Mr. Xing is the founder of the club. So I mean that's the reason. This info session is quite important. The founder is here and the president is here. So you guys should feel so lucky. Okay. And again, I think we are here to help you guys. Not only just 2 of us. We have about 100 and 200 people in Beijing to help you guys to connect, to help you with the career in the future. So it's your chance to leverage on that. But if you don't, we kind of force it, right?
I think we should just leave it. I think one of us should just answer this. There's a lot of questions.
Okay, well, you're enthusiastic, so let's do one more.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Emily. My name is Abby. Not like most of the applications, I have already have more than almost 8 years working experience, and I was a journalist, and now I'm one of the shareholders of a startup company. So our company is about K-12 education. So I'm not very confident about applying. So do you have any suggestion about me or someone else about me? Thank you.
You should be confident about applying. That sounds like a great background, and by the way, you guys should talk. It's about education. Yeah, no, I think that don't put limits on yourself unnecessarily. Yes, if you are still an undergrad, get some years of work experience before you apply. if you have 8 years of work experience and you have a background in both journalism and entrepreneurship and nonprofit, higher ed, or education, you know, I know nothing about the rest of your application background, so I can't, you know, there are never any guarantees, but there's definitely nothing that would be a red flag in any of that to me. So, be excited, apply. The only guaranteed way not to get in is not applying. Right? So, if it's what you want, you should apply.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Mr. Fan and Mr. Shing, for this amazing presentation. Really got me excited about CBS. You spoke a lot about getting to know who the students are, and my question is less of a application technicality question and more of a school identity question. You know, we live in a time when there's this anti-globalization backlash, and if we get into CBS, we're pretty surely going to become one of those bi-coastal elites. I guess my question is, does CBS have an overarching philosophy for business leaders and future business leaders, which are your MBA students, on how to understand and respond to this anti-corporate, anti-elite, anti-globalization trend that we're living in? Just wanting to understand that for the school I really want to apply.
That's a simple question you just asked there. So thanks for that. No, I actually think it's a really good question, and it's very certainly salient in these times. And what I would say is the overarching kind of moral value of the school is that diversity is good. We want international, dialogue. We want to do business internationally. We have a lot of faculty. We actually have a professor, Bruce Greenwald, who teaches a course called Globalization. He co-teaches it with Joseph Stiglitz. And they have slightly different opinions, and they like to debate during this course, so it's really interesting. But that, the question of elitism or the question of education, I think it's something that, in some way, there's no better place to be than a university to think about these things. Because it's not, you're not just listening to pundits in talk radio. You're not just listening to, the pundits on the other side in talk radio, right? It's actually thinking through, what are the real economic challenges? Because there's always going to be challenges no matter what the philosophy is. So, I think being at a university, I started actually working at Columbia in 2008, right when the recession hit. And it was fascinating because we had professors getting up and doing talks about the real estate industry, about the financial crisis, about everything that was happening in Greece and in Spain. And it was an environment where you could really hear from some people who've been studying these things all their lives and hear their ideas about it, and then hear completely opposing ideas about it from another professor who's also been studying it all their lives. And that dialogue really helps kind of expand your point of view. There isn't necessarily one right answer for everything, right? So I invite you to be part of the dialogue at a university. I think giving up on education, obviously I'm completely biased because I work for a university, so disclosure. But I think giving up on education because we don't want to be seen as elite is probably not gonna help things. Yeah. Yeah. Does that help answer your question at all? Yeah, of course. All right. Well, I think on that very philosophical note, I think we're going to say goodnight. I will be around for a few minutes, but again, if you have any questions, you can find me in the directory. And also, if you just want to take a quick picture of this is the admissions office email, so you can always find me through that if you have trouble finding me some other way. Okay. That is the office phone number. I admit to it not being my direct line, but they can connect you with me. I am sometimes on the road and not answering my phone, which is why it's a person who is always there. Yeah. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming out, and thank you to Mr. Xing and Mr. Fan. You guys are amazing, and we love you. And don't you want to be part of this alumni network? Yes. All right, thanks everyone. Oh, and special thanks to the Global Center. Alvin and his team has done such an amazing job putting things together and just, making all of this work for tonight. So thank you.